at times I would feel a lot of flooding of emotions during that period. And, that's what I try to explain in my videos also when I talk about spiritual awakening. It's like, it's not a moment where you just, get everything right and you sort of become a sage-like personality, absolutely calm and composed. It was nothing like that for me. So the idea the idea that you are an imperfect human being and you can do certain practices to become a different version of yourself. It sells in the material world, it sells in the corporate world, it sells in the spiritual world as well. I didn't even know myself. There were so many emotions that were suppressed underneath that actually now started to flow. And sometimes I would have outbursts, sometimes I would have anger episodes as well. The only difference between you and me right now is that there is no story running in my mind about what is happening. And with you right now, you are caught up in a story. You want things to be a certain way. And this is the only difference. There is no other difference.
Hi everyone. Today my guest is JAGJOT'S Singh, and I'm really excited to be sitting down to a conversation with him. I've discovered his channel quite a while back, and his videos have been popping up on my feed, and I found myself really resonating not only with what he shares, but also with him as a person, which is why I felt drawn to inviting him to a conversation. Hi, JAGJOT.
Hi, Maggie. Good to be here.
So nice to see you, and thank you very much for agreeing to have this conversation, because I actually haven't seen that many. I think I've only seen maybe one or two conversations on other YouTube channels. I always ask my guests to basically share their journey and their story of awakening, just to show how different and unique our paths are, that there really isn't one way of doing this journey right. There isn't any one correct way. It's simply however it unfolds for each and every person. So if you can just take it from whatever it makes sense to you to start talking about your own experiences, great.
Yes. So I think it starts around 2014 when my father passed. And that led to a series of inquiries, questions, what is consciousness? Where does it go? What happened to that entity that I saw as my father? And that's where it actually, I would say the seeking intensified at that point, uh, because now I wanted direct answers. So I studied scriptures, I read some books, I reached out to other teachers, and eventually one day, I remember this was again in 2015, and I had resigned from my job, and I had started my own work, which was failing, and I was sitting miserable, depressed, and all of a sudden I experienced this oneness, this this amazing sense of uh, all I can describe it as beingness, where I just felt that I'm everywhere in everything. So I could like, for example, I looked up at the sun and the tears started, rolling down my eyes. And I felt so much love. And for the first time, I realized that I was so alert and awake. And there was no separation between anything. And that experience must have just lasted a couple of minutes. But after it ended, I noticed a shift in my energy. And my first insight was that happiness comes attached with unhappiness. There is nothing on this plane which can remove that dualistic split. So that realization was so strong that every movement, every decision that I took after that, I took while keeping this fact in mind that everything that brings happiness is going to bring unhappiness. Now, I wouldn't say that it made me into a perfect human being. I mean, I still had my vices. I still was very anxious, and I still would look for answers. But I noticed there was a slight shift, there was a change. And the change was that every time my awareness drifted off to something, it came back. It just came back here every time. And nothing was sticking. So people would say, for example, an event like losing a job, that could be very traumatic for somebody who's actually caught up with the game, with the life. But for me, that didn't mean much. I was like, okay, if it's there, it's fine. If it's not there, that's fine too. And I went into sort of a period of seclusion for a couple of years where I just contemplated, and it was just all contemplation. And then I read a little bit of Jiddu Krishnamurti and Ramana Maharishi and Ramesh Balsekar finally. And the answers started, well, I wouldn't say the answers started coming in, but the questions began dissolving. And there was a day I remember I was on my terrace in New Delhi, and I just was so ecstatic that there was nothing to be found, there was nothing to be done. And I just felt free, that, okay, this is it. And I didn't know at what point that realization, there wasn't a particular point in time where that realization hit, but I just remember being very peaceful and being very enjoyable. I mean, it felt like a load had been removed from my back. It felt like that. So after that, life has been a series of observations. Now, still the patterns of anxiety sometimes show up, intense emotions sometimes show up. None of that has changed. But what I see different from the past is that in the past I would just dwell on it and keep sitting with it, and the story would run on repeat all the time. Now that doesn't happen. A spurt of emotion happens and then it drops. And then again, I'm just my spontaneous self. And then after a couple of days, again, I experience something, then it again drops. So it has become sort of a part of life. It is not much concern with what is happening, what is its intensity. So the thing was that yes, there was I was still feeling a little lonely because I wasn't doing job and I didn't have anybody to connect to. So I started talking. I started writing first in 2019. That was the first time I started writing, and then I started talking in 2022. It was during the pandemic, and people started connecting. They started writing, and that's how just the journey took off. And here I am now.
That's incredible. I'm really curious about the 2 years in contemplation because that sounds like a really long time. So I'm
Uh,
if you're
it was
okay
actually,
to
yeah, yeah. It was actually 4.5 years.
wow.
Yeah. So from 2015 to approximately 2019, I would say. Yeah. So I did not do much in that other than to just inquire into the nature of things. Like I would look at a brick and I would be like, what is this? What is this really made up of? What is its substance? What is the smallest thing there? Now I would read scientific theory on it. Then I would try to go into philosophy. And eventually I came to this understanding that I truly cannot know what exactly is this, other than just accept it that it is here. And so these are the kind of questions, contemplations that would happen. I would watch a lot of my emotions. Um, I would watch a lot of, I would say there was this watching of mind and the stories that were running in the mind, past, future, a lot of anxiety. That period was quite emotionally quite turbulent for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because at times I would feel a lot of flooding of emotions during that period. And, that's what I try to explain in my videos also when I talk about spiritual awakening. It's like, it's not a moment where you just, get everything right and you sort of become a sage-like personality, absolutely calm and composed. It was nothing like that for me. I felt as if there was a crack in my structure when the awakening actually happened.
Yep.
And that crack in the structure was painful for me.
Yep.
It was quite painful. And I didn't even know myself. There were so many emotions that were suppressed underneath that actually now started to flow. And sometimes I would have outbursts. Sometimes I would have anger episodes as well. But slowly it started to settle, and I started experiencing more calm after a while.
Mm-hmm. So would you describe this as your version of Dark Night of the Soul? Kind of a
Yes, yes,
experience?
exactly. Yeah, and I explain it as my concept. I don't say that this is the universal truth. This is how the process unfolded for me, and with different people, it can be different process.
Mm-hmm. And do you find it that with the people that communicate with you that you talk to, because that's one of the reasons why I was also curious to talk to you about, because there's so many people writing to you and communicating and sharing, whatever it is that's fresh and relevant for them. And I'm assuming that they're at different points in this journey as well. And so when it comes to the dark night, is there something that you might want to share with us in terms of how that differs from person to person? Like, what are some of the similarities or differences that you've noticed over time?
So yeah, Dark Night of the Soul is actually the most asked question that I get. Most asked inquiry is about the Dark Night, and different people explain. I mean, they talk about different symptoms as such, but the underlying theme is same. It's a state of flip-flop that they experience, which means that sometimes they feel ecstatic, happy, as if everything is okay, perfect, connection with God or whatever they want to call it, connection
Mm-hmm.
with the divine presence. And then after a while, they just go down absolutely in the darkness and they see no hope and they see despair, hope, depression, a lot of anxiety. So they constantly flip flop between these two states. And generally, the question is, how do I get rid of the dark night of the soul? When will it come to an end? And my answer usually is, I'm not giving any solutions as such. All I say is, just investigate who is experiencing the dark night of the soul. Who is the one that is confused? Who is the one feeling happy? Who's the one feeling sad? Who's the one feeling ecstasy? Who's the one feeling depression? So when you look at it, you will notice that this is a time bound process. I mean, it's happening in time. Uh, when I say time, I don't mean physical time, I mean psychological time. And usually, now I will use terminology that Jiddu Krishnamurti used here because it really resonates with me, where he says that um, there is a measure. I am this and I want to become that. And my unhappiness is that measure in between, that separation in between. And what he says is that the measure is an illusion, that separation is an illusion. You already are uh, whole, complete. So it's not about becoming some better version by working or, yes, you may do practices and exercises, and I advocate for them. And I say, yes, they're going to help you. Uh, yoga, breathing, pranayam, whatever you think you can do to help you during that phase of the dark night of the soul, by all means do it. But eventually, the investigation has to be inwards, like who really am I, and who is the one that is experiencing the dark night of the soul? So when I pinpoint that, that is where they get really confused.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the precise purpose, because when you get confused, this agitation, that is when the seeking intensifies. That, okay, what am I missing here?
Yeah. And so have you noticed that there may be several dark nights and they also can feel and be experienced very differently at different points in this process?
Yes. In fact, what I say is, um, it's not that the dark night ends. It's just that there is a shift in your perception. At some point, you just realize there is no me that is experiencing it, but there is experiencing of things. And in that experiencing, uh, since there is no separate observer involved, then it doesn't feel all that personal. But actually, things are just the same. For example, an emotion uh, at one point, when the sense of separation is high, may feel very heightened, may feel personal. Now, the same emotion may even appear after, the dark night, say, has ended and there is understanding, there is peace. And all of a sudden, again, you find yourself some variable in life going wrong. And again, you experience the same emotions. But now your attitude towards those emotions is quite different because
Mm.
your me is not that solid to hold anything. So you just see it for what it is, an arising, and you see it as an arising, it plays and it just subsides. And you remain at the substratum, which is the awareness. And that makes so one doesn't dub it as uh, the dark night anymore. And they say, okay, this thing comes and goes, so it's all fine. Even with sages, and we have seen that they have, even after realization, they would cry, they would show emotion. Even someone like Ramana Maharishi, when he um, heard the news of his friend passing, he cried, he shed tears. And also, there was a helper in the ashram, a lady who had suffered a lot in her life. She had lost her husband, her family, and her last hope was her teenage son, who also she lost. So when the son died, even then, Ramana Maharishi cried for her. So but it's just that for these people, there is no personal process to it. They just see it as arising, and they move with acceptance. But the thing is that since their emotions, their emotional center is quite open,
Mm.
they experience it fully, they feel it fully. They don't try to resist, and they don't try to dub it, or they don't say that, okay, I'm self-realized, so I don't, I'm not going to react this way, or I'm not going to behave this way. So that kind of filter is not there.
Yeah, and this is why, it's so interesting, my journey unfolded outside of any tradition, or practice. And so I got to learn sort of later on about the different sort of takes on awakening and especially what it's like after awakening. And I was just from where I was looking, it all looked like some kind of fantasies, in terms of the awakening being a kind of destination that you get to where basically you're not gonna be human anymore. Somehow you're gonna be beyond, floating on some kind of transcendental cushion, unaffected by life and circumstances and so on. And that may be true in somebody's experience. I can't speak for everybody. I just found it not to be true uh, in my experience, for sure. I would say quite the opposite. But but I have to say that there seems to be a point which I experienced after my first awakening, where there really was actually a much stronger sense of separation, and that sense of separation was really painful
Yeah.
because there was the glimpse into the transcendent, into that lightness of being, when, when that structure, it doesn't feel like you said, this
Mm.
solid.
Mm.
And then there was almost like back into it, and it felt even more burdensome, and it really looked as though there was this me and life, there was this me
Yeah.
and problems and other people, and there was this sense of being at odds,
Yeah.
just at odds, and really just being afraid of life and holding, life at arm's length. And so
Yeah.
and the reason why I'm saying this, because it is different to what we're talking about, the experiencing everything fully as just a natural arising of whatever it is in the moment. But I'm actually seeing it more and more that for many people, it's almost like at some point the mind hijacks the first awakening, especially any experience of emptiness, and just basically hides there in order
Mm.
to avoid life, in order to avoid discomfort.
Yes.
So, which is why I find the quote unquote dropping into the heart and the opening of the heart such an important part of this
Yeah.
process. So can you talk about that, and have you seen that in your own experience, and have you been seeing this hiding of different kinds in other people?
Yes, yes. So, this is, I have been very vocal about this whole thing that I refrain from using the word enlightenment, especially in India, because the word enlightenment is quite loaded here, and it is it is sort of an idea that if the person is if they have a particular diet, if they have a particular way of behaving, if they speak slowly like this and very calm and very cool and very composed, then they are enlightened. Or if they have a certain attire, or if they do certain activities, so they have a very fixed and rigid idea about enlightenment. And I get sometimes questions, are you enlightened? And I say, no, I'm not, and I'm not even interested in it. So i'm actually I'm actually pretty okay being a human. I and I want to use a mild language here, but I would say that
Mm-hmm.
I make messes. I make mess. I'm actually quite unwise, worldly. I need a lot of help and support sometimes. My brother is quite wise when it comes to worldly matters, and I take a lot of help from him. Like dealing with finances and other
Mm-hmm.
stuff. I take a lot of help from people. I take a lot of help from my mother also sometimes. She's quite wise. Um, I'm good with emotions. I can connect with people at a very deep emotional level. I can, I can bear my heart out, and I can say, look, the only thing difference between you and me right now is that there is no story running in my mind about what is happening. And with you right now, you are caught up in a story. You want things to be a certain way. And this is the only difference. There is no other difference. Otherwise, even Ramana Maharishi said that, there is actually no self that is realized. It's a misnomer. The word self realization itself is a misnomer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a paradox, that the seeker is trying to realize the self, but actually self means the absence of the seeker. It's like when the seeker disappears, the self is there. So I do emphasize on this fact that, even let's say after awakening, or whatever word you want to use, uh, I describe awakening as a crack in the structure of the personality. Now, this is just a concept of mine, just to explain and make things simple. I use this terminology. A crack in the structure of personality means now nothing appears as solid as it used to. So it is realized that whatever is gained, it comes with the opposite. So anything that brings pleasure is going to come with the pain. So even after this happens, you still will make mistakes, quote unquote mistakes. You still will, you
Be
still
a
may
mess.
continue to be, yeah, yes, be a mess. truly be a mess, but you're going to be okay with the mess because there is no central location to your mess. There is just mess. So, if there is mess, you're okay with it. If there is order there, you're okay with that too. That is the only difference. Sometimes it creates a little bit of a problem because people come with a lot of expectations and a lot of ideas which they've heard, and they feel that somehow that sitting with me, maybe meditating with me, they can gain something which they don't already have right now. And all I try to do is just bring them back to their most natural state of beingness, which I tell them is something you can tap into it on your own. You don't even need me for it. It is readily available, and it is whatever you are experiencing right now. There is always an option to go back there and just be. And one of my favorite quotes is from Ramana Maharishi, where he says, "Your job is to be and not to be this or that." If you can do that much, the job is done. Then rest are all stories.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I see this. I see this a lot. I think, it's extraordinary how this identity structure operates, how the mind operates. Like it will hijack the enlightenment or awakening or whatever and turn it into a whole other new identity. So we can literally drop, certain kind of conditioning, that we got from parents or schools or religion or culture and so on, but then we swap it into, the non-dual, the awakened, the enlightened, the spiritual, the whatever, and then there's still this need to be, I call it like this need to be somebody and need to
Yeah.
follow a particular script,
Yes.
and how uncomfortable the mind gets the moment we sit with the not knowing, because we're
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
used to operating in that way. And I think that that's one of the biggest fears that people also face in this process.
Yes. Yes. Uh, people want things to be predictable. So uncertainty is scary. And even for me, uncertainty does feel scary. But uh, it's just that the need to become something or to attain something, when it's not there, these things don't acquire momentum. So I may still react to life in the way that I used to, but I'm not going to hold a story around it. So what ends is the story, the narrative around someone behaving in a particular way, and then the mind trying to classify, oh, does this person have a personality disorder or what, or this or that. No, I don't see it like that anymore. I just see interplay of energies, and just consciousness speaking to consciousness. But the thing is, sometimes people perceive this as an achievement. Now, in that, it's very difficult to explain that no, it is not an achievement. It is not that I've gained something. It's like a layers have been stripped off, and I didn't even do anything to strip off those layers. They just got stripped off. And what you're seeing is just someone who's being very authentic and very who's just bearing out everything. Whatever is right now coming is totally unfiltered, without worrying about what others will think, what others will say. So
Hmm.
the human aspect of us always remains, and it remains an imperfect entity. And I think that's the beauty of life. Because I do listen to a lot of um, Buddhist podcasts, from other channels.
Hmm.
And I listen to these monks who are so creative. They're doing music, they have their own band, they're doing art, they watch movies, and they like to celebrate, sing, dance, and I do all of these things myself too. So, enlightenment doesn't make you, wear white robes without, you can still dance and you can still enjoy life and you can still, do all those things that you did earlier. Um, But I see them, I see these monks living life fully and embracing their imperfections as well. They do, they do confess on the podcast that they do get angry, that sometimes they do experience doubt, sometimes they do experience fear. And it is the same for us too. It does come up sometimes, it shows up sometimes. But it's again, it's the same thing, that there's no hold to it and there's no immediate need to react on it. Now, sometimes reaction does happen. I mean, just a couple of days, I was having a discussion with a friend, and it just became heated discussion. And she was, "Why are you like this?" And I don't know, but I am like this. So I can be quite irritating around friends and loved ones. And most of my arrangement where I am is mostly in mess. Even this setup that you're seeing, I have been guided properly how to do these setups. But now, again, the same friend of mine, she helped me to set this up. And so, so yeah, I mean, I'm actually the same. The person, the human aspect of me, there isn't any change there. Now, yes, I would say certain patterns did drop in my case,
Mhm.
um, but I don't attribute awakening to that. It's just that the understanding kept refining, and I kept looking into those patterns, and there was analysis, and there was just going deep into the heart space. And in that heart space, I found that I don't need to react to certain things. And it is still there. Sometimes I still analyze some of my old patterns, they still exist, and I give attention to them. And some are there, some are not there. So it's just like that.
But I think that there's, an important kind of distinction between non-reactivity that is a natural byproduct of the inquiry, of meeting whatever was, the part that was
Yeah.
triggered and stuff like that, and trying to manufacture non-reactivity,
Yeah.
trying to not be reactive because that's what awakened people do. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So then
Yeah.
we're really, this is not a natural expression. This is actually
No.
not only that this is kind of sort of suppressing and suffocating in
Yeah.
terms of just a human experience. It's not
Yeah.
very comfortable experience, but often it actually backfires because this body can only take so much. So what often tends to happen is that the more we do that, then we blow up in ways that are actually not very healthy, you know what I mean? Or maybe
Yes.
a bit too much, or maybe say things that we really don't mean, but like the body just, can't hold it anymore and it comes out that way. So I'm curious because you are so much more well read in terms of the scriptures, in terms of the different teachers than I am. Where is this idea about the enlightened quote unquote person being non-reactive, or even in terms of not having emotions or not having reactions, responses to whatever is happening in the situation? Do you have any idea how that was even created? Like, where did that come from that people now feel like they need to live up to this ideal?
Well, it sells, it sells. So the idea sells. The idea that you are an imperfect human being and you can do certain practices to become a different version of yourself. It sells in the material world. It sells in the corporate world. It sells in the spiritual world as well, where they say, even in the material world, when you go, it's like become a better version of yourself. So there is a whole gamut of self improvement, where
Right.
they're
Mm-hmm.
teaching you this is the way to
Mm-hmm.
talk, this is how you can control your reactivity and become better. And the same ideas are reflected in spirituality, as I would say conventional spirituality as well. Now, for me, the breakthrough moment was when I heard Ramesh, and Ramesh said that nobody has any power or control over the next thought that is going to appear in consciousness. He said that uh, the next thought that comes and the reaction that you have towards it, there is no control over it. Now, if you are, if it is destined for you, then you may react, and nothing can be done about it. But what happens is, since there is no, since the solidification of me is not there anymore, it's a bit transparent. There is this investigation into what is happening in horizontal time. So if the mind comes up and says, why did I react? I shouldn't have reacted. I'm awakened. I should not have reacted. That is the trick, which again the separative mind has come up and it's playing. So that is witnessed. And when that is witnessed, when I say witnessed, it doesn't, what I'm trying to say is I'm not analyzing it. I'm not trying to, do a psychological analysis on it, like what led to reaction, the childhood stuff or whatever. No, nothing. I'm just totally attending to that pure emotion that is running through my system right now. So the pure emotion is, it could be anything. It could be a deep shame. It could be a feeling of guilt. It could be a resentment, a deep resentment. I'm just sitting bare, completely naked with the emotions. And when I do that, and I do not allow a container to wrap around it, what I see is that in horizontal time, those thoughts do not bother. So reactivity in the moment will always be there. Sometimes we may be able to control it. Other times we may not be able to control it. In fact, Ramesh would give a very good example of it. He would say, when you're able to control it, the ego comes up and says, that's the way. You're on the right path. So, it sort of creates a pride, a sense of pride that, oh, look, I controlled my mind. My mind is now in my control. And if it fails, react, then it goes immediately into guilt. And it's like, why did I react? I should not have reacted. Immediately there's a regret. I did something wrong. Now that, again, then with the guilt, eventually you hit on shame, because when you continuously keep saying I did something wrong, you eventually reach to a point where you start saying I am wrong. Okay, so that is shame. And then again guilt, so it's a never ending cycle: shame, guilt. So that is how the separative mind creates the structures, different structures. I'm reactive to this, I'm not reactive to that. But, if you just be totally present with the content and just see it in totality, that requires courage. It requires a lot of awareness. And um, sometimes we don't have that space to analyze it, so we react. But there are times when we have that space, then we do not react, we simply witness it. And in that witnessing, we see how this whole thing is playing out. The issue is that when people talk about awakening, they see it as a method, as a means to just destroy reactivity. And I have written some articles as well where I say that reactivity cannot be completely destroyed, because it's a part of the biological setup that we've got
Exactly.
from nature. So, if somebody pokes you, you're going to react, you know. And for some of us, the psychological triggers are also very deep, and sometimes we will react to that. The only thing is, after the reaction has happened, what is our quality of life? That is where we can investigate a little. That is where we can reflect, you know, maybe do some inquiry, and that may lead to some insights. But nothing can be stopped in the moment. So if they are expecting that just because awakening has happened, all their troubles are going to go away, all the problems are going to go away, uh, it's not going to happen like that. The problems will start dissolving because they won't be relevant anymore. Like, for example, worry about my career, my life choices, where am I going to live, what am I going to do. These kind of things started to disappear. Like they didn't bother me after, again, I quote unquote awakening. But before that, yes, there was a lot of concern. Like, no, no, I have to be in the corporate system. I have to get up. I have to go up in the ladder. I have to perform well. This is my life, and this is the way it has to be. After awakening, it was more or less, there wasn't much concern with it. Okay, if it goes this way, fine. If it goes that way, fine.
Yeah. You mentioned the movement of the mind, along the sort of linear time. I think
Mhm.
that that's, if I can say that that's a massive difference,
Yeah,
because
that
you
is so.
see you see how much that movement in that linear time is creating so much suffering, because you sort of continually find yourself arguing with what was, you know,
Yeah,
right? Sort of
yeah,
could have, what should have
yeah,
been, what might have
yeah,
happened, and
exactly.
so on. And actually, it's interesting when I heard you talking about shame and guilt, how actually that movement,
Yeah,
because many people will carry sort of shame or guilt around some things of the past, right? Something that they did, and so on. And so what I noticed, like in my over my very many dark nights, that that it was actually the resistance to fully experiencing that shame, and actually fully acknowledging the fact of the situation, that I in fact did cause hurt,
yeah, yeah,
that the two things were actually keeping that shame in place,
yeah,
and so
yeah,
the movement was continually actually pushing away a
yeah,
acknowledgement that I did
yeah,
do
yeah,
something, so
yeah,
taking full accountability for that,
true.
and then allowing this mind and body to totally give yourself into the
Yeah,
experience of shame. Because once you do that, so it's not the actual, it was not what was done even, or
yeah,
even the shame that is creating the suffering, but the resistance to both
yeah,
those
yeah,
things that is keeping it at place, and not only creating suffering, but is continually perpetuating the sense of a doer, that it
yeah,
could have been any different. So that's why the mind continues to argue. And
yeah,
so I find it really fascinating how, when I saw that entire movement, like this arguing with the past, or trying to predict,
yeah,
anticipate,
yeah,
the future. So sort of being always somewhere else,
yeah,
is
yeah,
not here with
exactly.
precisely what is fully, that was where the suffering was at. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that.
Yes, exactly. In fact, you're quite right. And I have seen sometimes people use that concept to sort of bypass, and they would say that, oh, it's all happening. I didn't do a single thing. No,
Ah,
to have that realization, you have to understand that yes, a reaction has happened and it's a part of your conditioning that caused the reaction. Now we move from there. Once we have established that this okay, I like, for example, the other day, I was having a conversation with a loved one, and I just I said something hurtful. Okay, so she felt bad. So I did apologize. I said, no, I'm really sorry I said that. I did not try to bypass it by saying, no, this is all happening. It's all a grand design, and uh, it's the universe planned it that way. No,
mm-hmm.
that okay, there is some truth to that understanding, but it's not as simple as this. First, you've got to feel it. So avoiding the content, resisting the content, is actually making the content stronger, and it is even distorting the content. So the shame is getting stronger the more we try to resist it, fight it. the mind is then creating additional dialogues, and then there's more stuff coming up, and then there is reactivity like spite and malice and jealousy and other things. But the moment we sit with our emotion, and Ramana Maharishi talks about it, where he says that the mind has to go inward. What does that mean? That means that just focus on yourself. That means be present with yourself, and see the mind's movement, how it is trying to externalize. They did that. They are okay. I said something nasty, but it's just because they said something like that. So you see, it tries to escape. It's all escape, escape, escape. Some people use blame, some people use substances, some people use different other things. But when we are totally still and with ourselves, that thing does not have the space to grow. It just releases. And this is what Nisargadatta Maharaj, who was the teacher of Ramesh Balsekar, also said. He said that what comes up to the conscious surface, it burns. And what he meant was that if you're totally still, you allow that spaciousness where these things can actually come up. The problem is we resist. We don't want to feel it. So there are two forces then at play. One is like feeling it, another one is resisting the feeling. So there's, cognitive dissonance, there's resistance, there's
Yep.
stress around it. And we are avoiding stress. We're not able to feel the stress. And that's why it just dictates our life, it, causes all the reactivity. And then we're looking for solutions, which again becomes another frenzy, trying to find solutions here through theories, philosophy, through reading books, through masters, teachers, and everything. But we're not attending to ourselves. We're not
Yep.
sitting in silent contemplation. And this is where I was quite impressed by some of these podcasts from the Buddhist monks, where they were admitting all of this. Like, okay, yeah, we were resisting it for quite a long time. In fact, I'm sure you must have heard of Thich Nhat Hanh,
Mm-hmm.
who's a late Vietnamese Buddhist monk. He made such a candid confession, such a beautiful confession. Um, which really touched my heart. He said that there was a time I would talk about Buddhism, I would give all the philosophies, I would give all the theories, but I wasn't home.
Yeah.
He said, I wasn't home. And he said, for 20 years that happened, till my 40s, I kept talking about Buddhism, but I wasn't home. It's only later that I came home. And then it didn't make a difference where I was, with who I was, what was happening. So now, this admission from a speaker of, from a speaker who's been so much in the forefront of spreading, Buddhist teachings, is such a beautiful act. It really shows that he took he took the courage to actually sit with his emotions and see what was going on. And he admitted that yes, it was happening like that. Initially, I was just giving theories, and I was telling people, and I wasn't even sure if it's working for them. So eventually, when you sit with yourself and you see the content, then you start to see this whole movement, like what
Yeah.
is going on, how it is coming up, how the resistance is coming up, and then you're watching the resistance, and then the resistance drops. So when the moment resistance drops, the other content is gone.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, it's just being able to see that, it's to me that this is where it's at, because this mind is the greatest trickster, you know what I mean? Like it
Yes.
can quite, this is the like so intelligent, in that way, how it can co-opt absolutely anything, in order to take us out from what's right here, from like the truth of the moment, and that includes spiritual concepts, that includes
Yeah.
non-duality. And so, as we talked about accountability, I mean, there's no better way to avoid accountability than the concept of no doer. I mean, the mind will be more than happy to hijack no doer to go.
Yeah,
Who's
yeah,
who who's done it? Like who's doing this and who's doing that, right? And I
yeah,
always say that if this question arises, then there's a whole lot to see, but I always say it's quite the opposite, I find, because everything becomes so utterly transparent. There's no hiding. So there's no, the accountability is inherent in that transparency. You just
yeah.
cannot, you know, the one who would quote unquote avoid
Yeah.
that responsibility or accountability is gone,
Is gone. That
Yeah.
shield is broken. That's the beauty of it. Now
Yeah.
it feels scary to an outsider that how
Yeah.
can a human being be so open and so vulnerable and just expressing endlessly. And because sometimes I cry a lot. Sometimes I would see something. I live in India and I see abject poverty.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes it can be heartbreaking, and I recently went to a site here in the Himachal Pradesh in the mountains. It's called Dagshai. It was a British facility in the 1940s for prisoners in India, and Mahatma Gandhi was also there for a day. And that place basically has a history of a lot of trauma and a lot of torture. And I was there. I was in the jail cells and everything, and I started crying there. I could just feel the energy. I could feel how people must have been tortured here,
Yeah.
and actually stood in a space where I was in the bar, and there was just a wall behind me, and I was just standing there, and I was there with someone, and they helped me navigate that space. But I just started crying. The what humanity must have gone through.
Yeah.
So it's from what I see is what awakening has done is it's broken my shell. Now, my shell was very strong when I was in the corporate world, because that time it was like I'm a man. I cannot show weakness. I have to be strong. Now I don't have to be strong, and that shell is already gone. And with the shell gone, it doesn't matter how I'm perceived as well. So, sometimes I cry, sometimes I laugh. And when I laugh fully. When I cry fully. So there's no discounting there.
Yeah, I love that. It's uh, I remember the moment I had this what I call the heart opening,
Yeah,
and it was just so freeing to actually have the experience of my heart just actually breaking.
yeah, yeah,
To experience the full on heartbreak, where
yeah,
really I remember the tears were sort of like they didn't even feel like they were coming from my eyes. They were like coming from like the depths of something, it was just like incredible. And yes, there was a lot of pain and there was a lot of sadness and there was a whole lot of stuff coming up to the surface with it, but boy, was it like total emotional freedom, after years of not even knowing how much I was holding in, and I was actually holding in after the first awakening. After the first awakening, I was dismissing all the emotions and everything as, oh, it's just an illusion. Oh, it's just a story, because and it's not that there isn't truth to it, because this was actually where my first awakening happened, seeing that thoughts are intangible and that I'm not my thoughts, that, thoughts have no solidity. There's no solidity to this me, to this reality, and so on. But this was a great example of how, after this initial sense of separation, the mind co-opted it as like, well, as like rejecting things and dismissing things, dismissing basically what was true in my experience. So that lasted on and off for years. So I can't even tell you how incredible this heart opening was. So massive. I felt like this, whatever space opened up could hold everybody's heartbreak. So,
Exactly.
so to give you an example, like before that, I would not be able to watch, let's say, even on TV, like, news showing
Oh,
something
yeah,
horrible, like people suffering, and I just would not be able to even look at it, and now I was literally able to just not only see it but fully experience like the suffering, not just of my
yeah,
own but of the world. But it no but the space was so like infinite, that open,
yeah,
that it didn't feel like a burden, if that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that now we are coming to something very substantial. The so ultimately, what I found was that all this intellectual analysis about the nature of reality is not going to do a single thing. What's going to actually bring in the solid insight of who we are is actually the compassionate heart. So compassionate heart actually leads to true peace in daily living, because until that heart space is open and expanded, the mind, because we are relying on the mind and intellect, which is the instrument of the mind only, so it is limited like the mind, and we're trying to know the nature of reality. Now it does help up to a certain extent,
Mm-hmm.
because it does bring you uh, some coping skills when there's a lot of emotional upset. It does bring you some coping skills, but it's not enough. We know that it doesn't work, because intellect is the last hurdle. The moment there is crack in that, the heart space opens up, and that is something beautiful. And that is where my message now goes, is like, if you can tap into that heart space, that is going to bring you much more openness and the
Yeah.
experience of vastness, rather than trying to figure it out intellectually. And not just that, it opens up space for a lot of emotions. So even in my talks, or satsangs which I conduct weekly, I basically try to get people to just be quiet and just be present with themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and allowing for whatever happens. Anything, even if sleep happens, I say, okay, sleep, no problem. Anything. There is no way, you don't have to sit in a particular way. Meditation is not done, meditation happens. So meditation is not it's not an activity. Meditation is basically your direct perception to what is. That is true meditation. Till the mind is caught up in this idea of things should be a certain way, there's no meditation happening.
Or
This
getting
simply
somewhere.
mind. Yeah, yeah. This still mind just conforming to its old patterns. It wants to stick to it, because that's how it survives. That's how it operates, sneaky. So it tries its level best, shape shifting, entry through the back door, covert ways. But at some point, it just fails, and it sees that there is no escape other than to allow surrender to happen, total surrender to happen. And I think Ramesh, he very beautifully picturized it for me. Now I have my own imagination around it, and he says that eventually, when you really get to know that I am not the doer, okay, when you really get to know, not just an intellectual
Yeah,
understanding,
yeah,
but
yeah.
understanding of the heart, that I am not the doer, then the question comes up, then who is this me? Now I imagine that as a child sitting completely defenseless and absolutely with zero thought, with complete spontaneity, just sitting defenseless. Like the ego is at that stage is like that child. It has no place for any movement, and that is the last question. After that question, there is just heart space awakening. It's like boom, like the spaciousness. And then you realize, oh my God, this is also it. This is also it. There is no differentiation. There is no, I don't know if this makes sense. I mean, there is no, I don't see any boundary in anything. It's like
Mm-hmm.
just I think the best word would be to describe it as a seamless whole. You know, it's not an experience. It's not an intellectual experience. It's just this pleasant sensation. It's very natural sensation in the heart space.
You mentioned ego, and I feel like tempted to go there because one of the concepts that I came across as I was learning more about, the different traditions and what's being taught and talked about was this attempt to get rid of ego. I think it's massive, in terms of that being talked about. And it kind of ties into, I feel, the heart space, the end of separation anyway, in terms of what we talked about, because at least in my experience, I saw ego as resistance that perpetuates the sense of separation, right? And so the heart space actually allowed for all the things that we deem egoic and dark and bad and wrong to not only be there, but with that softening to be able to actually look at those things properly,
Yeah.
to see like what's that actually about. There's a lot of misconception about what ego is. It's almost like it's made into this evil-like entity that needs to be, murdered or,
Yeah.
or gotten rid of somehow. And I can see how it actually totally backfires as well, because it continually keeps us at odds with whatever experience we don't want to have or don't like or see as unspiritual, unawakened,
Yeah.
or wrong,
Yeah.
right? So, can you share some thoughts on that? How this is so misunderstood, and
Yes.
do you see it a lot in the messages that you receive from people?
Yes. So, ego has been villainized from the very beginning as something bad, undesirable, which is responsible for our misery. Now, there is some truth to it, but we must understand what is ego. So, I'm going to just use the terminology that Ramesh Balsekar used here. So he would say that ego is not just identification with the name and form, because that's the traditional definition.
Mm-hmm.
If you read the scriptures, that's the traditional definition. Identification with the name and form is ego. He says, no, it is not just the identification with the name and form, it is identification with the name and form with the sense of doership, that I am the one who's carrying out everything. And he says that what needs to eventually go is the doership aspect and not the identification, because we need identification to navigate life.
Mm-hmm.
Jagjot is talking to Maggie. Maggie is talking to Jagjot because these are two separate egos. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any communication. So he would give an example. For example, if somebody called Ramana Maharishi by his name, he would turn and respond. So that response comes from the ego. The only thing is, when we talk of the resistance, that is the problem, ego, because the resistance is operating in horizontal time. In the moment, there is just pure expression. So let's say I had a reaction. Now, the reaction is from the ego, it's from the sense of separation, but that's not the problem. That ego is not the problem. That sense of separation is not the problem, and that reaction is also not the problem. The problem is what comes up in horizontal time. Why did I react? I should not have reacted. That is the resistance. So that sort of perpetuates the reaction even more, because it's strengthening that whole separative mind which is trying to suppress the emotion.
Yeah.
So emotional energy is getting suppressed. Resistance is just pushing it down more and more and more. So what we are doing, we are building up a volcano and then we explode different. So when we keep exploding, our quality of life suffers because then we do not experience peace in daily living because then we constantly ruminate. Then we are either in the past, oh, I reacted that time, and now I'm going to react even in future. So we live in this anxiety, sorrow, anxiety, sadness, and again in the continuous loop of that guilt and shame cycle.
Yeah.
So he said that it has to be understood. The nature of this separative entity ego has to be it has to be seen. He didn't even say it
Seen.
has to be seen by you. He just said that it has to be seen. What he's basically referring to is just being witnessed without any judgment, um, without any analysis, because again analysis is part of the separative system. Just see it in all its purity, and you will see that it is actually not a problem. Even in the scriptures they say that it is the ego that tells your hand to pick up food and eat when you're hungry. If there was no ego, your hand wouldn't know what to do. You wouldn't know how to eat food, how to satiate yourself, how to um, nourish yourself. So ego by itself is not the problem. The problem is the sense of doership. I did something and I should not have done this, because that creates a story of me. That creates narrative around oneself, and then it creates narrative around other people. If I did something, they also did something. So it's just all enmeshed in that.
Yeah.
Once you realize that uh, no, there is no doer as such, the biological organism here is reacting according to its conditioning. The biological organism there, it's reacting to its whole conditioning. And what is the current underneath is consciousness. And that consciousness is the reality. Once that is understood, the problem of ego actually is not there anymore then.
Yeah, this is why I very rarely even talk about or use this term, because I think, like enlightenment, it's like awakening, like all these
Yeah.
words, I
Yeah.
think they're just so packed with
They're packed with.
completely different kinds of meanings, and things. But yeah, I definitely see it a lot, this kind of the waging war with the ego now, by which ego
Yes.
is understood as usually a certain type of certain qualities. And I think that I just want to clarify that I don't we don't mean, because I see that often also being misunderstood, that we're not saying that if something's been done to someone, that makes it okay, or that we go, oh well, there's no doer, therefore it's fine, that I called someone an asshole 5 minutes ago or something
Yeah.
like that, or was rude to, I don't know, bus driver or something like that. We're not talking about condoning or not condoning. We're actually talking about a full acknowledgement as well of the fact that this happened.
Exactly.
But we also
Exactly.
recognize that it couldn't have not happened, because if
Yeah.
it happened, it did, and so
Yeah.
there's no arguing with that, right?
Well, Ramesh gave a very beautiful example of this. He says that you can actually go on a rampage and start hitting people and say that it's just my hand which got raised and I'm not the doer. The hand did it. But then the thing is, yes, your hand did it, but then the organism which is connected to the hand is going to receive the consequences as well. So if you accept the consequence, because you will not be, the action will
Yep.
have a reaction. If
Yep.
you accept the reaction, then of course, by all means, go and do whatever you want to. you know
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
if the hand raises here to hit somebody, the hand there will be also raised to hit you back.
Yep. Yep.
So if you're ready for the
Yep.
consequences, then you can go with your theory that you're not the doer. So the only thing is, this whole idea of non-doership is basically in reference to the time, the linear time,
Mm-hmm.
where there is actually the event is not happening and the mind is coming up with, I did something horrible, and it
Mm-hmm.
lives with that story. So,
Yep.
one of my books is The End of Me and My Story. And it is about this whole phenomena that in the moment, action and reaction will happen. And if you do an act and um, you will have to take accountability for it, because there will be repercussions, reactions from the other side. The society is going to take you hold you accountable and responsible. So when you do that act, if you do that act and uh, in the moment, it's not a problem with whatever you've done. It's the later stage in the horizontal time when you are with yourself, and the mind is constantly going into the past, and
Yeah.
I did something horrible. That is when the concept of non-doership brings you into this groundedness presence, because
Yeah.
then you realize that it is just a story being repeated by the mind, whose center is the I. Now, this I is just moving in the past. So that is where the doer entity, when it dissolves, that is what Ramesh calls self-realization or enlightenment,
Right.
or whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it.
Yeah.
And that just what it means is that life on an average becomes peaceful. It
Hmm.
becomes peaceful, it becomes joyful. But there is no stopping pain. In the moment, all pains will be there.
Yeah.
So this, even Buddha said that, there is no escape from pain.
Yeah. I'm really aware that we can't go on and on because I can see how we could literally, you and I, talk for hours, and we go into all kinds of avenues and nuances and all of that. But I am curious, um, what are some of the things that you are being asked most about? You did say that Dark Night of the Soul is one of those things, but is there anything, if not asked about, then people sharing? Like, is there anything that basically comes up a lot that I haven't mentioned in this conversation that you like to talk about?
Well, relationships do come up. People come up with relationship issues, and of course, awakening and dark night of the soul, that's the common theme.
Mm-hmm.
But people having interpersonal relationships, relational problems also sometimes come up. And I recently started a series on relationships as well. So I released my last 4 videos were actually on that subject. And the idea was very simple. The idea was that the you know when two people are interacting with each other, and let's say they are having differences, they're having fights, what basically is happening is the person here is actually interacting with their own projected image of the other, and the other person on the other side is actually interacting with their own projected image of the first person. So it is like no communication is happening at all.
No.
It's just images. People are just interacting with themselves. And the result is that both parties feel neglected, rejected, emotionally distant, and that causes relationship rifts. So,
Mm-hmm.
again, there's no prescription as such, but the idea is to just see this whole process of how this separate self creates an image. And where is this image coming from? It is coming from our own fears, our own stuff that is hiding in the shadows. That's where it's coming from, and all the wounding. So we perceive the other as a threat, and then we start operating from fear. And when we do that, we are completely lost in presence. So, again, the idea is to just bring yourself back here and now into the presence and allow things to settle. So, the moment things settle and the two are in presence, those images just drop. And when the images drop, that is when the real communication happens. That is when the real relationship building happens. That is when solutions happen. So if we are just, on defensiveness, and we're trying to just throw jabs, no communication is happening. So, I mean, this is one aspect that I also cover sometimes in my question and answers.
What are the other aspects, if you have anything in mind?
Well, it is usually this that one person feels neglected and they want to know how spirituality can help in uh, creating this connection. And sometimes they ask, how can we change the other person? And I'm
Right.
like,
Oh
no, you
gosh.
cannot.
Good luck with that.
Yes. I'm like, no, they're not going to change.
Hmm.
Uh, Maharishi said that you just be concerned with yourself. Like, all you can do is just, see what's going on here. You can't even change yourself. You don't even have that much strength to change yourself. All you can do is observe. And if any change is destined to happen, it'll happen in that observation, and it will be impersonal. It's like through force you cannot change yourself or forget about the other person. You cannot change anybody. So this is, that is when I tell them that if you want to work, you work on yourself, and if things work out, then they work out. Otherwise, it's just
Yeah.
you will have to take a decision at a certain point.
One of the things that I know some people fear around awakening is that if awakening happens to them, then that will impact their relationships and maybe even lead
Yeah.
to an end of a relationship. Is that something that you come across?
Oh yeah, I mean it's my personal experience too,
Mm-hmm.
they do end. A lot of relationships end, a lot of friendships end. And I think it's okay because so I can just speak for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I had relationships and friendships before awakening where I acted in a certain way to fit in that group. And after this realization, I saw the futility of trying to fit, and then I dropped the facade. And the moment I dropped the facade, I saw that those people were moving away. They weren't happy with me because they wanted a certain version of me, and they were getting something else entirely. So there was
Mm-hmm.
no common theme. You know, I wasn't going out, with them to fancy places and
Mm-hmm.
eating fancy food or, drinking alcohol or anything like that. So there was no common ground, no connection. I wasn't gossiping around about people. I wasn't complaining about things. So there was no, no common ground. All I wanted was to talk about reality, nature, um, and they weren't interested in those topics. So those people moved away. Those friendships ended, and I think it wasn't it wasn't a problem for me as such,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Mm-hmm.
accepted that. Okay, that's so be it. But you know what? I made new friends. I came in contact with different people who were having the same experiences, and I started connecting with them. And then I heard their story, and there I found the common ground, and that's how our community was formed on YouTube. And now we meet for talks and satsangs, and we just explore, we share, and we explore. That's it.
Yeah.
There's nothing to teach as such.
That's brilliant. This was one of the most illuminating insights also that came out of the different dark nights where I was basically facing the shadow work. I will never forget the day I realized that I was never actually seeing people.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
actually never seeing people, even the closest people to me, especially maybe even the closest people to me, for who they were, but more for what I wanted them to be or for what I needed them to be in order
Yeah.
for me. So in many ways, and again, I'm not demonizing that or making it wrong at all, but there was so much unbelievable selfishness in that and self-centeredness, when really the whole thing, the whole feedback loop was all about what does it mean about me and what does it mean for me and what does it mean whatever. And it
Yes.
was actually, it was painful. It was really painful to see that because it also meant, on the other hand, the loss of really certain fantasies that I was
Yeah.
living in my head. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
sort of I
Yes. Right.
idealizing, seeing what I wanted to see because it fit
Yeah.
my fantasy. So, it was also painful and there was a grief when that fell away. And actually, for example, I realized that the bond that I had with someone was never there. It was totally
Exactly.
imagined, you know?
Yeah.
So in many ways, it feel like certain people quite literally died, even though they didn't die, but they felt like they died to me,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And so there really was a lot of grief that came with basically seeing the truth versus
Yeah.
whatever it is that I wanted to see or projecting or
Yeah.
them on me and so on, you know? But
Yeah.
there was also total freedom. And I have to say that this hasn't changed. I've always been like this. I've always wanted people to free to come and go. I've always been like this, and that became even probably maybe even more okay with that, in terms of understanding that awakening or no awakening, people change and evolve, and certain connections may have worked at this stage of life, and at this stage
Yeah.
it's something else, but you don't. Yeah, just people are just sort of free to be whoever they are without making them wrong or needing them to be any different.
True, true. Yeah. And that breaking down of the fantasy can be very, very
Yeah,
heartbreaking. And the grieving period can be very long because, but, you cannot blame them, neither can you blame yourself.
yeah.
You acted from your own conditioning, and of course
Hmm.
they were acting from their conditioning. And generally, in the initial stages, we show a certain version of ourselves, and then we get fixated on those versions because it matches our fantasy. And when that matches our fantasy, we're like, okay, this is my person, this is the way it's going to be. But then we realize that no, this is a mask right now, and they are wearing it because they're trying to protect themselves, and you also are wearing it because you're trying to protect yourself.
Yep.
And when that breaks, it is like a heartbreak. It is like it is very painful, can be very painful. So breaking down of fantasy is painful, but that's one of the greatest pointers, the greatest suffering one can endure, because it actually brings you to the heart space. It begins to open your heart space. And
Yeah.
then you allow them to be the way they are. So you allow them to change if they want to change. And I also learned this the hard way, that no, people will change and you have to allow them. But you don't have to sacrifice yourself, or you don't have to modify yourself just because they have changed. You can be yourself too. And that is total freedom. Just people being, the way they are.
But this is why I'm saying that, this freedom, this is my favorite bit,
Yeah.
about awakening, that
Yeah.
this freedom it extends to everyone else, and
Yes. Yes.
you don't, this is the end of holding the world, other people hostage,
Exactly.
anymore to how
I
they
was
need
thinking of
to
the
be,
same
and
word. Yeah.
right, the sort of their
Yeah.
my expectations of how they should be, let alone thinking
Exactly.
that I know anything about what's good or best for the other person. I
No.
mean, my God, I mean, that was like that was one of the big, like, pinnacles of seeing my arrogance in this idea of this little separate me knowing something, anything about the trajectory of someone else's life. Like,
Exactly.
what?
Yeah. The me tries to research actually.
Yeah,
It goes on the forums, and then it tries to see
yeah,
what is wrong with them and
yeah.
how to fix them.
Yes, let me tell you.
Let me tell you, yes. And in that thing, it is just, again, it's avoiding its own pain. It's not sitting with its own pain. It is not
Yeah.
attending to itself. So, Maharishi said that you be worried about yourself. Don't worry about the world. Don't try to fix the world. Don't try to make it a better place. Watch here what is happening. That itself will do the
Yeah,
job.
absolutely. Yes. I know we could talk much longer, but I think we've talked about so many things. I think that will do, at least for now. Maybe we'll come back some other time at some point to talk about other things if you're open to it. But it's been such a pleasure meeting you.
Absolutely. Same here.
And
It's been a pleasure and it's been a beautiful conversation.
oh, thank you. And tell us, tell my people where they can find you. What is it that you do? Because you mentioned the book, and I was kind of surprised because I thought, how did I miss the fact that he has a book? I don't know. So tell us what you've got.
Well, yes, I mean, there are four books I've written, and
4 books.
yes, there are four books. And yes, there is the information you can find it on jagjotSingh.com.
Mm-hmm.
The site has everything, and I'm basically on YouTube, Jagjot Singh Non-Duality. If you'll search, you'll find it.
Mm-hmm.
And we hold uh, weekly talks, interactions, and guided meditations, which are free of cost for anybody to come and attend and be a part of the group. And that's about it.
And do you actually do retreats where you live?
Yes, I haven't done any retreat here as such, but I did one retreat in Mumbai.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I am planning to now do some online retreats. Right now, this space here is not. I mean, I need to prepare it for retreat, so I'm actually
Yeah.
waiting for a little help from someone. But if called, I go. I mean, I was invited by a group of people in Mumbai, and we went to a small village over there, and we had 3 days of uh, talks and discussions, and it was a beautiful interaction that I had with those people. And I'm always keen for the mountain. So if people invite, I go and I talk. All I
Is
ask
there
them is just arrange for my stay and travel. That's it.
of course. And was the retreat that you mentioned, is it where the animals were like really loud? I really loved it. Like I don't know if it
Yes,
was
yes.
sheep or I don't know what sort of animal
Yeah,
it was, but I
yeah,
thought it was
yeah.
hilarious.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was a very remote village in. It's approximately 2.5 hours from Mumbai, and yes, it was raw nature. So, in fact, it was so raw that we had toads in the
Goats,
commode.
right?
Yes, we had frogs, we had snakes. It was pure wildlife. So it was quite an adventure. Uh,
Amazing.
yeah, but yes, the caretaker there was very nice, and he was very helpful, and the people, the seekers who were there were very sweet, and they took very good care, and it was a beautiful environment. It was very peaceful, actually.
Yeah, it really felt like it, but the goats just made me laugh. They didn't care that there is a retreat. They didn't care about any silence or anything
Oh no,
like
no,
that. It
they
was
were
just
all
like
over the place.
they were just doing their own thing, and it was great. Jared, so yes, I'm gonna leave all the links below so anyone who would like to find you will know how to find you. And thanks so much again for this conversation.
Thank you so much, Maggie. It's been so wonderful speaking to you, and thank you again. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.